What kind of things would you show people who are not used to the idea that math is beautiful? How would you show them that math is beautiful?
Yeah, I mean, well, you just gave a couple excellent examples there.
Thank
I
you.
mean, if let's say we were to just jump off of the exploration that you're describing there, I think the idea of infinite sums and whether they converge can definitely capture a lot of imagination. Um, like, I think one of the most fun things there is that you say, uh, okay, is it the case that just because the terms are getting smaller and smaller, does that mean the sum will necessarily converge? And really digging into the example of 1 over n, where it's like 1 over 1 plus 1 over 2 plus 1 over
Yeah,
3.
the harmonic series.
Yeah, like the harmonic series. I mean, there's so many interesting ways that you can go with that. First of all, showing that it diverges, and like the way that you do it, you kind of have this
The
comparison
one by
test.
two thing, right? At the
Yeah, you
bottom.
like
Yeah.
you chunk them in the appropriate ways, and you say, hey, based on how we group these, it looks like things can always uh, there's a series that we know diverges that looks like 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 that sits underneath it, so it pushes it up. But then you can ask how quickly does it grow, and you can try to come to the idea that it's around the natural log of n, and that like really justifies why we call it the natural log to some extent. But there's a little difference, and that little difference seems to approach a constant, and it's the special constant of nature called the Euler's constant. But Euler has too many things named after him. Um, I actually watched a beautiful video the other day for the Summer of Math Exposition contest we did this summer, talking about if you take this harmonic function where you like add up the first n values for 1 over n, could you extend that to real numbers? If you define h of n to be 1 plus 1 half plus 1 third on and on up to 1 over n, at first it doesn't seem sensible to have like h of 3.5 or h of 3.75. But can you? Is there a sensible way to do it? And this video gives a really beautiful explanation of a way that you might do that. Um, in your how do you extend things to make these other values sensible? One of the videos that I put out that's probably got the most hate because it was early on and I didn't know what I was doing. But I was talking about how uh,
Minus one by 12, is that it?
it wasn't quite that. Numberphile did a one on that got a similar amount of unjustified hate, but it was in a similar vein where if you take 1 plus 2 plus 4 plus 8, where they're positive powers of 2, which obviously blows up to infinity. But there's like, if you just apply this like formula that you're describing, it seems like that formula would pump out -1. It's like, okay, well, it doesn't apply because it's not a convergent series. But is there any way that it's -1? And the sort of two completely different senses in which you want this sum to be -1. One is in terms of like this thing called analytic continuation with complex analysis, and another is in terms of a totally different metric that you put on like rational numbers. And this is all to say, like using something like what you described as a starting point to say, hey, there's this really nice trade-off between if you want to make sense out of something, and then you kind of try to ask like, is it useful to the world? Like if you just say, hey, this divergent thing converges because of analytic continuation, that's not helpful. But if you try to say, hey, analytic continuation is this thing in complex analysis, and complex analysis as a whole is this incredibly useful field for like such and such reasons. I think later in life I started to care a lot more about that. When I was like a high schooler, I was just happy. I didn't care if things were applied or not. But I've learned like a lot of other people care if they're applied. So like every time that you do these explorations where it feels like you're sort of inventing stuff to make it work, if possible, try to like draw a little thread to where it like helps you build something. Um, a long-winded answer, but it's essentially just saying like uh, the very thing that you were describing has flowering on top of it, like so many different things that I think kind of capture the beauty that you're asking about.
Yeah,
But
it's
I'll
fantastic.
quit pontificating and go on to the next question from I guess BJM.